All right. So, hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you're watching this webinar. But I am super excited today to introduce Joseph Licari. Am I saying that right, Joseph?
Licari.
Licari. Okay.
I was
So,
closer than most.
yeah, super excited to introduce Joseph Licari, who is the regional director for undergraduate admissions for the Pacific Northwest in the neighboring town of Redmond. And so we're super excited to have him here. And thank you, Joseph, again for just being here, spending your time with us. And I'm excited about the conversation that comes up. All
Perfect. Yeah,
right.
great to be here, and thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so many of you, may or may not know that George Washington University has recently been invited to join this prestigious Association of American Universities. And I'm sure that that's a feather in in your cap. And can you tell us just a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so while I'm still learning a bit about the invite myself, basically the AAU, the Association of American Universities, was founded back in 1900, from what I recall. Excuse me, and now it'll be just 71 universities. So it's definitely, a pretty elite honor to be considered in that's such a small grouping. Basically, from what I understand, AAU is kind of known for their distinction in research. So it's kind of lauding to our accolades within research and opportunities that students will have within that realm. So like I said, I'm still learning myself, but definitely it's just kind of speaks to the amount of research opportunities that students will have. And definitely, they're not just limited to seniors or juniors or certain majors. Research isn't required for every major. So, it's not going to be as intimidating as it might think just hearing the word research. But definitely every student will have opportunities, and regardless of their majors, they'll have, resources available to them if they are looking to partake in research.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think research is just becoming such a big deal in the admissions world right now. And I know that even as, originally or like many years ago, so I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. So I know until a couple of years ago, there weren't any research opportunities, or rather, there weren't too many research opportunities available for even high school students. But now they are, now you have so many high school students who are also trying to get some of this academic research under their belt. And I know that, that's really great that, GW is, offering this, more widely to students as well. Right.
Yeah,
All right.
definitely.
Okay. Fantastic. So can we talk a little bit about the student population? Right. And how would you describe the student population at George Washington? Like if you had a couple of adjectives or just give us an idea about, what can students expect? Who are going to be their people there?
Yeah, I'd say above all, just some adjectives would be committed. Definitely is going to be the first one that comes to mind, and then energetic for sure. So committed, I'd say the student population as a whole is committed to themselves, to their education, but also to the community as a whole. The GW students they're very independent and self-driven, but also they are hungry for that, that kind of community. And not just on the college campus. There's so many students that get involved in various nonprofits, activism groups, even, full internships within Capitol Hill, just because they do have all of DC available to them kind of as an extended community. So yeah, I'd say definitely, students are going to care about the community. And then academics, the students are very, very motivated. You're going to GW because of its academics, because of its opportunities. And I typically see most students do take advantage of those.
And that's amazing. And I think just in terms of the location, right? I think GW has so much to offer, everything from its choice of majors to, the resources that, it has. I'm sure the location is a big plus for GW, but what would you say are some of the other strengths that you think really differentiates GW from so many of the other colleges and universities in the country?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, you mentioned it, location is typically what I would talk about. Uniquely, we're kind of right in the middle of the city, so it's, easy to think, DC, it's a small district. But even within the district, there is kind of various locations where you could be kind of at a disadvantage or an advantage depending on where you're studying. And thankfully, location is definitely the top factor for GW. I'd say what I just talked about, the student community. When you're around other students, if you're interested in politics and your classmates are applying to Capitol Hill, to the White House, to internships in the State Department, it's really easy to get motivated, to be inspired. Also to have those contacts, once you start applying to those internships. So I'd say kind of the networking just kind of, unfolds itself basically as you're continuing on in your classes. And last benefit I'd say is education, definitely. We still have pretty small class sizes, despite having close to 12,000 undergrad students. So I'd say, having professors that actually know your name, where you can actually raise your hand and ask a question. You're not just in a lecture hall, style classroom for every single class. I think that's definitely going to be pretty important. And all that kind of ties into, once you start, looking for faculty members to sponsor your research, once you look for, a faculty contact when you're applying to an internship, recommendation letters, all those kind of things.
Right, right. So that's great. Yes, it's so important. And I think especially the smaller class sizes, right? Super important, right? And that's how students can really build on their academic experiences. So that's amazing. I mean, sometimes you have schools that are really big in size and, students have to figure out the learning very much on their own. So I like that, manageable size, right?
Yeah,
Which is great. It's not too small and it's not too big and it's just right, right?
yeah.
And that's great. And so, we know that just by virtue of, being in DC, right, you have some of the majors that would be, that would be popular. And again, would be more politically driven. Would you say that that's correct? Or what are some of the, more popular majors? And do you have any new and upcoming majors or something that has been recently introduced that students may not yet know about?
Yeah, so being in DC, as I'm sure for the rest of the DC colleges, our most popular majors are definitely going to be political science, our Elliott School of International Affairs, even our journalism programs are really popular. But I think most students find kind of uniquely once they get to GW is it's not just kind of a special focus in those political programs. So we've got a full med school on campus, as well as a law school. So there's going to be students that are either in those graduate programs or are planning to apply to various med programs. We do have a full nursing school as well, so you're not just going to see students that are in their poli-sci classes. I'd say aside from that, most popular majors that are a little more unique, definitely our Corcoran School of Arts. We've got a full kind of arts program where if you're interested more in theater and the performing arts, more in music and so sorry, I'm drawing a blank here, and graphic arts and whatnot, then there's going to be a spot for you there. And then also engineering. So most of our newer programs are going to be kind of, tech or STEM focused. Computer science, computer engineering, both of those are rather newish and are definitely becoming increasingly popular. And then I know we do have quite a few new data science programs, I believe within the C School, which is School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, as well as within the business school. There should be a few new data programs coming soon. But yeah, definitely, computer science and those STEM programs are getting to be a lot more popular.
Right. And especially, I think if you're coming in from this area, right, there's something about being on the West Coast and everyone wanting to do computer science. I think that's the hottest growing, major, and it has been for the last couple
Yeah.
of years, and we don't see it slowing down at all. And so, yeah, absolutely. So that's great. And, just if we can take a step back and, if you can help us understand now when students are actually applying to GW, right? one of the, most popular questions I get asked is, how much does my major really count, right? So if I say I'm applying to engineering versus, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, like how does that, or if I'm looking at art or graphic design or something, and I know some of those, programs may need a portfolio, and so maybe that's not the best example, but just if we're applying to the College of Arts and Sciences versus applying to really an engineering program, how much does that major, how much does the admissions team really take that major into account when making admissions decisions?
Yeah, so first things first, basically, we don't have any impacted or capacity constrained majors. So it's not necessarily that we're looking to fit a quota per se of a certain school. So basically, when it comes to the admissions process, we aren't necessarily considering your major very heavily in our initial review, but that's not to say that it won't be considered at all. So when it comes down to shaping our final class, so after all of us admissions readers have read the applications, determined which students are admissible and which are not, then when it comes down to having to actually draw a line somewhere, and where some students that might be very well qualified might end up on the wait list instead, that's where sometimes major can come into play. So there's not really a game or a system that students can get around where this school is harder to get into than this one. Some years our Elliott school will just get way too many applications, and some years our business school might not get enough. So that's ultimately where major comes into play. I'd say on a whole, though, it's about give or take like 15% or so of our actual review considerations. So definitely I would suggest students not weigh too heavily on, what major they're selecting, just because, the overall application is going to be much more important in the review process. And then we also do allow students to change their majors. So basically how it works at GW, you'll list on the application the school or college you want to be admitted to, and then you'll list your preferred first choice major, but you're definitely not locked into that. So if you are admitted and say you listed undeclared in the Columbian College, you'll be admitted into the Columbian College and you'll just declare your major, the following year. More or less every GW student enters kind of as a pre-major per se, when every student's going to be declaring their major, the following year or so.
Got it. So then there's really no disadvantage to applying undeclared, right? Then
Yep,
that's what it sounds
definitely
like.
not. Yeah.
Okay, right. Because I know that sometimes students are like, we want to apply, but we're not sure what are they going to look for if we apply undeclared, right? Since you mentioned, a little earlier that maybe it makes up like the major you choose comes down, that seems to come into play right at the very end. Would that be
Yeah.
correct?
Yep. There's one little caveat to that I should have mentioned. So first, to confirm your question, applying undecided definitely, won't hurt your application. I will say if you're applying to the C's school, School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, that's where we are going to start requiring calculus going forward. So that'll be, updated on our website and all that. It'll be pretty transparent. But yeah, that's one thing that will be a requirement. Just in years past, we've required at least pre-calculus. And we've just found in the data that those students that don't have calculus might not, have as much success rate as those that do. So just to kind of help, students be better prepared for the program they're applying to. And then aside from that, the Corcoran School of Arts, you did mention earlier, some of those programs might have a portfolio required. Just if those are required, then, obviously that'll be kind of technically considering your major choice if your portfolio is not up to standards.
Right. No, and that absolutely makes sense. Like I always tell students that, they say sometimes, so sometimes I'll get students who say they want to study computer science, but they're like, but we don't really like math. And, and I will tell them that, computer science is actually called a mathematical science. So you're going to have to do a lot of math. You
Yep.
want to try to do as much of, calculus, because that's going to be super critical to your success. And in fact, the more, like 1 or 2 years, like 2 years of calculus is definitely going to look better than 1 year of calculus. And 3 years
Yeah.
is going to look better than 2 years, right? So if you can
Yeah.
hit, advanced calculus by the time you're applying. I mean, that is amazing. You're really showing colleges that you have the preparation to help you succeed, at university, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, so that's great. And then, I think something that goes hand in hand with this is also, is also like test scores and the SAT or ACT, right? And so what is GW's policy on this? Are you test optional this year? Are you continuing to be? Because I think previously you were test optional as well, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we've been test optional since 2015. It's not a COVID policy. It's not going to change anytime soon, as far as I know. So basically, over the past 3 years or so, including this year's data, about half of our applicants have submitted test scores, and then just about under half of our admitted students have test scores on file. So there's really not going to be a statistical advantage or disadvantage. What I would suggest to students is, some schools will say, we'll test optional, we'll test blind. They don't really, depict if it can hurt your application one way or another. So I would say take a look every year at the school's middle 50% range. For GW, we update it on our website every year. And if the school range is, 1360 to 1400 and you've got a 1420, then in that case, it definitely can, benefit you if you submit those scores. Whereas if a student at GW submits a 1260 SAT score, then in that case it could potentially hurt their application. So more or less in our situation, we're going to look at what students mark on the Common App. So if you want your scores considered, mark yes. If you don't, mark no. Even if we get them automatically through Common App, we're not going to consider them unless you mark that you do want them considered.
Oh, so that's great. So that, I love the transparency behind that, right? Because sometimes students, amongst all the other decisions that they have to make, they're trying to navigate this space as well. So that's great, that you make it really clear, and that's important, right? How about if we switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about essays and like the elephant in the room, right? Which is AI and Chat GPT, and how students are, high school students, many of them are leaning on this for their essay writing. Do you have any thoughts about this? Do you have any advice that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I'd say it's ever revolving. So, I don't have an answer, and I don't think anyone's going to have a set answer for a few years at least. But I'd say ultimately, just for the student, whether or not the college advertises that they have a way to check it, or whether they say they absolutely don't have a way, I'd say ultimately, it's not really going to benefit you too much to have the perfect cookie cutter essay written by AI. Just because, it's this as the technology is growing, we're going to start seeing what's predictable with AI, what's not. But it's going to be very hard to have your unique essay if you're not the one writing it. Only you know your actual life story. So I'd say, if a student needs some grammar help or something like that, it's not the end of the world if they, check online or use some sources. But writing the whole essay with AI, I would just think takes out kind of the personal touch. And they're not perfect either. If we catch a sentence that just makes no sense and it's kind of showing it was robotically written, then it is going to kind of play in the back of the admissions counselor's mind. So ultimately, I'd say, it's not going to give you a huge benefit. Most counselors aren't looking for the perfect essay or the perfect grammar. So ultimately, I'd say just use that space to share more about yourself, from your own voice.
Right, that makes sense. And do you know, Joseph, if there is, any plans to use AI in the admission space? So is there, are there conversations? Because I was talking to, admission officers from a couple of different schools, and we were having conversations about whether they're going to start, and especially since the workload has increased and the number of applications has increased so much. I know colleges are beginning to have conversations about, hey, how can we employ AI? Maybe they, just have AI at least do the first round or something like that, right? Do you know if there've been any conversations? And I know this is kind of just throwing this out there,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
just curious.
Not in my office yet. We've not had conversations about either using it or cracking down on it. The university as a whole, I think just last month or so, put out a statement in regards to using it for classwork. Kind of their stance there. But yeah, in terms of admissions, we haven't had those conversations yet. I would imagine No matter how accurate, the AI can get, there's still kind of a concern with data privacy. When you have a robot reading a student's essay and not catching it, if a student marks something concerning or something like that. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't know yet, but it's interesting time to be in our career, definitely.
For sure. And it's all really brand new, right? So I think colleges are also trying to figure this out as much as students are. And I know that for some colleges as well, they're planning to add in additional, maybe like change the supplemental around a little bit or add an additional essay and stuff. So so there's definitely it's definitely dynamic, right? Everything, like a
Yeah,
lot of moving parts even as we speak. So yes, thank you for sharing that. Um,
yeah.
and then how about, for students again who are especially looking at applying to engineering, right? And if they want to if they want to share, YouTube links, if they want to share maker portfolios, are those links and, blogs? I mean, do you actually have time to review that? Because I can tell you that being part of an admissions team before, like 9 times out of 10, quite honestly, I did not have time to open up those links and even view those as much, right? And students sometimes invest a lot of time on that. And I always tell them, you want to focus first on the pieces that they're asking you, answer the
Yeah.
questions that they're asking you because they may not have time to review that. But I'm curious about GW. I mean, how do you guys go about this process?
Yeah, so first to answer your question, do we have time? That answer is definitely going to be no. That's not to say that we don't look at everything though. So basically at GW, every school advertises they've got a holistic approach to their application. At least in our case, we definitely do. We're going to have at least one admissions reader doing the first read. And then if it's a new admissions reader, there's always going to be a second read. Some applications even get sent on to a third committee. So definitely there's going to be at the very least one human looking at every single application. So with that, we say to students that we don't require any additional information and we don't consider it in our review, but we also let them submit as much as they want. So, if on the Common App, if there's a link to a student's small, personal Etsy business where they sell, homemade crochet goods. It's ultimately on the admissions reader if they're going to click on that or not. It's not a requirement, it's not written that it's in our review process. But every recommendation letter, the supplemental essays, things like that we do require, all of those will be read, by an admissions reader, definitely. When it comes to, the student that submits 11 recommendation letters, I can't say for certain if that gives you a huge advantage over one or two really good recommendation letters. But yeah, basically, if it's, if a student overall has a strong application, those extras, really aren't going to help too much or might not even get opened. The only place where, maybe some of those additional materials might come into play, if a student, appeals their decision and provides, additional context, or even if they're waitlisted and we're going to go to the waitlist to decide who's going to, come off the waitlist and get admitted. In those cases, we might review, as much additional materials as they submitted, but it's not really in our flat, basic review process that we consider all those.
Right. No, and that's a great point because that's the other thing that I tell students is that when they want to put in a third letter of recommendation, I always tell them hold on to it. And if you are placed on the wait list, then many universities give you an opportunity,
Yep.
to formally present this, right? And that's the time when you need to be, actually making in that effort or putting in that effort to put that together,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Yeah. So that's great. And, if we can talk for a moment about the student life, right, on campus. And you already shared with us earlier, what the student body looks like. And, but how about like safety on campus? Because again, many of these students who are coming in, especially, from international countries, that's again, a super popular question that I get asked is, how safe is the campus? What are some of the resources that's available, to students? Um, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so first things first, just gonna say right off the start, since we are an urban campus, right in the middle of a pretty popular city. I'm not gonna say it's super quiet and like you're never going to hear of something. But on a whole, most GW students, at least that I speak to, do share that they feel pretty safe. On campus alone, we've got quite a few different resources, including the GW Police Department. And then since we are still in the district of DC, you'll also see, DC police officers. So obviously when you're 4 blocks from the president, there's going to be quite a bit of, security and police presence around. But even still, like I said, it's a city, so some things can happen. What a lot of students and sometimes even parents, staff like myself, what they find is really helpful is we sign up for the GW Police Department alerts. So via email, phone call, text, whatever you prefer, you can get contacted by them immediately when there's an event. Even if it's just a suspicion, might not even be a confirmed, interaction or crime or anything. And then a lot of students take advantage of the GW Safe Ride. So it's kind of like a Uber or a Lyft, just for GW students. Excuse me. So sorry, I got to take a sip of water.
No worries. I'm making you talk a lot. So yeah.
But yeah, so basically GW Safe Ride, no matter what time of the day it is, as far as I recall, you can use the app and coordinate with the GW security, and they'll come and pick you up, drive you to your dorm, drive you from your dorm to the gym, etc. So most students will utilize that at night, if they're going to hang out with friends or something, just to get back to their dorm. And then on campus, you might have heard in the past that we didn't have any traditional dining hall options. So if a student got out of, soccer practice late and wanted to get dinner, they might have to go into the city to find food. Thankfully, now we do have multiple on-campus dining options. So can't say, statistically if that's safer or not, but, it is going to be keeping students, contained closer to campus. So yeah, overall, like I said, it's an urban environment, so I can't say it's going to be perfect, but as someone that's been around other urban campuses like UW and Seattle, I do feel that GW feels more or less pretty safe.
Right. No, and that's a good point, because I feel like, so I mean, I spent a lot of time in Bombay, actually now Mumbai, right? And in any big city, you have to be savvy. You have to be street smart. And that's another skill that you take away from this, right? And so for students who do want to go to college in an urban environment, I think it's really important for them to, it's another skill that they learn. But of course, being safe, and I'm glad that, it's good to hear about those dining hall options within the campus community. I think that that's important. And certainly, yeah, but you have to keep your eyes and ears open at every point, and that's another skill that you learn, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, the kind of students that are going to be graduating from GW are probably going to be working in, bigger city centers as is. So, political students, they're going to be moving to DC or their state's capital at some point, regardless. A lot of students study abroad in Paris, London, etc. So, like you said, it's kind of just preparing students early on to get that kind of street smart, savviness.
Yeah, I'm 100% agree. 100% agree. All right, that's fantastic. Maybe one last question, which is, do you have any advice? I mean, you've already shared so many amazing things about GW and, about the students and the academics. I think we've covered a lot of different topics, but do you have any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the community?
Yeah, I'd say kind of more focused on the searching for your right college. Kind of two pieces of advice, actually. First one would be, if you can visit, the campus. Obviously not going to be accessible if you're looking at 20 different out-of-state schools. I know those trips can be expensive and pretty time consuming, but definitely anything you can do to try to kind of build a connection with your campus or even your campus community before you get there, or even before you decide which college, I think can definitely make that decision feel a little more, I guess, make you feel more confident in that decision. I personally ended up enrolling at a school that I toured the dorms once and that was it. And I didn't really do any of the events or anything. I didn't know anyone going there. And it was a campus of 60,000 students. And day one, it was a little too overwhelming. So I ended up transferring to a different school pretty early on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I'd say, definitely if you can get that experience early on, just to see if the vibe, if it's going to be a right fit for you. And then I'd say, in terms of as you're actually applying to schools, I know it can be very enticing to kind of take it easy, senior year, to take that pottery class instead of the extra science class that you don't need, or even to kind of let your grades, relax in that final year. I'd say definitely don't relax too much in senior year. So in terms of actually choosing your courses, every college that I've worked for now does definitely weigh pretty heavily the senior year curriculum. So I know as a student, I took like 3 classes, dual enrollment, and I think one of them was like photography or so. And that was my senior year plate. And then I, a little too late in the year, realized that that was going to have a negative impact. So I'd say definitely, if you can push yourself, academically, stay involved with those activities and whatnot, it definitely can make a pretty strong difference in your application.
Yeah, but excellent advice, Joseph. Excellent advice, because I know that especially when students right now, they're actually beginning to prepare, for, and this is rising seniors beginning to prepare their college applications. And again, they will say, until when do I need to keep this momentum going? And
Yep.
senioritis does, is very real, right? And, I always tell them that if you were a straight A student and you get 1 or 2 Bs, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
But if you drop down to a C, or or anything lower, then you really don't want to find yourself in that situation, right?
Yep.
Because I've seen colleges go back and ask for explanations and say, hey, what happened? This is not what we expected, right?
Yeah.
And so senioritis is a big deal. And yes, we're always trying to keep students involved, engaged, motivated to complete the year and to finish up strong,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. This was incredible. You were incredible. You gave some amazing advice, and I'm sure the community is really going to appreciate everything you've done. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Joseph. Appreciate your time and your insights.
Yeah. And thank you so much for the invite. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
absolutely. All right. Great.